Robert Scott Bell Show.
From time to time, heck, from every time, we feature superheroes on the Robert Scott Bell Show. And I've got a superhero joining me right now. I got to meet her for the first time, I believe it was in person at the Health Freedom Expo. She was plugged into the Canary Party, the Autism One crowd, and it was awesome. She is a superhero. She was at the Maine convention, Republican convention, and she nailed that Romney supporter who was trying to kind of put out phony delegate selections of Ron Paul supporters to kind of throw everything off. She's here right now. Her name, Ginger Taylor. Welcome to the Robert Scott Bell Show.
Hello, Mr. Bell. How are you?
Mr. Bell, trying to make me feel all old, are you? Listen, we covered your YouTube account of the uncovering, so to speak, of the chicanery going on up there by the Romney supporters. And I thought it was a brilliant stroke there to kind of corner him and go, hey, I don't want to be recorded here. Of course you don't. You've been caught red-handed. Mm-hmm. And you're a kind of gal that does not like the corruption that goes on in any field, because you're also involved with the Autism One conference. We're going to be together in Chicago, May 23rd through 27th. Also, you work with the Canary Party out of Minnesota, which is really political action in relation to the autism vaccine issue, etc. So what was it that got you plugged into what happened here at the Maine convention? Let's get the backstory.
Well, I really the convention it was a hurry up and wait process. There was lots of stalling. There was lots of back and forth because they knew it was going to be incredibly close. The Ron Paul people, again, incredibly well organized, as everybody has reported. And their strategy was, if we can get our guy elected to the chair of the convention and run this, then we know they can't cheat. We know the votes will have to be counted. We know that the rules would have to be in fair play. So they were like, they asked everybody to get there 2.5 hours early before it started, 3 if you could, to make sure everybody was in, credentialed, seated, and everything was taken care of. And all the Ron people were there by the time it started. Romneys weren't, so they started another 45 minutes late. They kind of waited, which is fine because, again, we want everything counted. We want this to be a fair process.
Well, Ginger, was there any element or evidence of hijacking?
The stalling, it was the first sign. So there was stalling and more stalling. And
okay.
Really, Romney's lawyers were there challenging everything that happened.
Okay.
The convention chair, Brent Tweed, was elected. Ron Paul's guy for that was elected only by 4 votes out of more than 2,000 cast.
Wow.
So it was incredibly close. And after that, when we started really to try to move to the actual business of, and it took hours to get just that done because they hand counted every person on the floor more than once. They did it several times. Once that was done, we actually
2,000 plus votes counted more than once?
Yeah, there were, I believe, around a little less than 2,300 votes.
That's
they haven't had this big a turnout at the Republican convention in a long time in this state. And it was exciting. And literally everybody I saw, it was just a sea of Ron Paul stickers on their shirts. There were some Romney people, and then there were people who just didn't have any presidential sticker. But everybody who was there for Ron Paul was very excited, very, there's a lot of energy there. So when we got to the delegate count, to actually vote for delegate, and, if you've seen the video and kind of saw the shenanigans that were going on, we were waiting again because there was another, challenge and kind of waiting to sit around to talk on. We hadn't even got to the nominations process yet.
Yes.
I was just sitting and looking around. I had my husband and my children with me because I wanted to teach them about, politics. And I was looking around, and the head of the Maine Ron Paul campaign and is Eric Brakey, and David Boyer, who is another young man working on the Ron Paul campaign. I noticed that I was looking at him and I thought, you know what? One of them looks like Jake Gyllenhaal, and the other one looks like Sam Rockwell. I think I'll take a picture of him and just make fun of him on Facebook.
Okay.
So I took a picture of him, and then I realized that they were yelling at a guy. So I walked over and said, "What's going on here?" And that's where the video started.
Oh.
And they had caught the guy red-handed, and he apparently had he immediately knew where the cop was and went to him. So I think the plan was, if you get caught, just go straight to a police officer and complain.
Right. And it was
we
like,
from there.
poor little baby. You can't handle being confronted with what you're doing.
Yeah.
I don't.
He was on the floor without credentials as well. You're supposed to have your name badge, your credentials. He didn't have any, and I'm tucked in a shirt or something.
Okay, so he was literally playing the subterfuge game. This wasn't, on a whim, I'm going to try and do this. I mean, obviously, to do all that he did, it was planned.
It was planned and it was coordinated because there were at least two people involved. You had somebody who had to get the names of us who would seem like we were, in the Ron Paul camp and would legitimately be nominated. Mm-hmm. You had to print the ballots. You had to go to Staples. You had to spend money on this little subterfuge. Yes. Make these up. He was passing them out. And then another guy who we have identified named David Sorensen, who's actually a policy aide in the Maine House of Representatives and involved in the Republican Party. And I think he was an intern for Susan Collins, Senator Susan Collins at one point. He approached the microphone and nominated the people on the list, on the two fake lists that were being handed out.
So he had to actually play along as if this was a real list. And at that point, you were even nominated. That was even more bizarre because firsthand you didn't put your name in to be nominated.
Exactly. So when I filmed them, catching him handing the list out, I never looked at the list myself until after I heard, after I sat down to make the video. I actually started reading, wanted to check, make sure, and I was like, what am I doing on here? I did not say that I would do that. But the Ron Paul campaign had already chosen me to endorse me the following day for an alternate delegate. Okay. So I think that's where they got my name. Somehow they got the alternate delegate list, which had not been released. So again, somebody inside, and it turns out the guy, David Sorensen, who at the microphone actually nominated us, was at Friday night a Ron Paul meeting where they were talking about strategy and whatnot. Right. Some people had seen him there, thought he was acting fishy. So I approached him at the microphone there was a pause, and after he had nominated me and other people. Yes. I mean, he had a spreadsheet in his hand of names, long list of names. And I said, I had my video camera, but it didn't tape. And I said, why'd you nominate me? And he wouldn't look at me and just looked around and was very nervous and clearly wanted me to. I asked him about 3 times and he just wouldn't look me in the eye. And, I think he and the guy in the red shirt, who we're calling Charlie Red Shirt or Charlie Cheater. Some people call him Charlie Cheater. We know his first name's Charlie. We don't know his last name because he has his last name covered up. The following day, that they were both embarrassed. They both they didn't fight. They didn't whatever. They both were very sheepish afterwards. Okay.
So, do you think they expected to be caught? I mean, based on their behavior.
I'm sure that they didn't.
No, but the one guy, as you said, hightailed it over to the police officer, says, I don't give permission to be taped here. And I'm thinking, what is the cop going to say? It's like you're in a public forum. How is it you're not going to be taped? But everybody's taping everything nowadays.
Yeah. It's not a... I don't know. I don't think they expected to be embarrassed like they were. I think they maybe thought they were going to get away with it, but... I don't know, I had gone back to the guy Sorensen who nominated people and read his Twitter feed, and he'd been insulting Paulites and calling them names and, making jokes that when he went to his county caucus, he needed to have a gin and tonic with them. And he was going to take his black helicopter out of here because it was so crazy. And it was, for somebody who's working in policy and state government, I don't want kids. I don't want, frat boys in my government.
Playground frat boys. You're right. Yesterday on the show, Ginger, we had Tom Mullen talking about the media bias and the code words that they're given. It's like talking points. As you said, it could be a tinfoil hat. It could be any number of things that they try to denigrate, marginalize, somehow make less of this movement back to liberty. And so clearly this person has been involved in that. Now tell me, how successful were they? At the end of the day, I mean, we kind of know the delegate count, but I want you to reiterate how successful or how much of a failure was their attempt to play this game in this way?
It was an absolute and utter complete failure. They, Ron Paul's people were elected to every position that came up. They were, kind of exposed as fraud on the internet because it happened in Nevada at the exact same time in the same day. After lunch, after they'd gotten a hold of the Ron Paul slate. I think it's really backfired. There's national news stories now saying, talking about these accusations. And the really interesting thing to me is that the coverage on Fox News changed on Monday. All of a sudden, Bret Baier, who had famously rolled his eyes at Ron Paul last fall, was praising him and talking about the energy in the party and whatnot. And I was like, okay, now you need to see that this is a real movement. And the other thing I think that's important here, there's going to be a lot of posturing at this point because we found out that the delays that were taking place and a lot of the motions that were being made to hold up the process at the convention, were being initiated by Mitt Romney's head lawyer, who they'd flown out to Maine, Benjamin Goldberg, who was one of Bush's lawyers during the Bush-Gore fight for the election. Now, if you're worried, Maine is a little state with 4 electoral votes.
Yes,
you don't send $1,000 an hour lawyer to Maine for no reason. They didn't send him to Nevada. They sent him here. And there's an old saying that goes back to the 1830s. As Maine goes, so goes the nation. Because we used to hold our elections in September because of the weather before. And whoever was elected governor as Maine, that party would win the presidency. And it is a bellwether state. What happened, and it has been for more than 150 years. So there's a fear about what happened here last weekend, and it's been justified by the news coverage that we've seen. And all of a sudden, a little bit of warming to Ron Paul and his people. The other thing is, so the Republican Party and/or Mitt Romney's camp is going to contest the seating us, the delegation. We're already planning to go. The head of the Maine GOP met with us and said, listen, I'm fighting for this slate. As far as I'm concerned, this is the slate that's going to be seated. They're going to have to,
On what grounds, Ginger, have they made news on the exact grounds that they would say we will not want or we will disallow the Maine delegates to be seated?
Nobody's, not to my knowledge, have they made that official statement. Someone in Maine, Judge Cragen, who lost his bid to be the convention chair, made the statement that the Ron Paul people have so screwed up this convention that they're not going to be seated in Tampa. There was no, he was just spouting off. There was no grounds for that.
Well,
I believe that the Romney's lawyer who was there was basically, he kept calling for, we need to know how many delegates have been seated and a roll call of the delegates. And because a lot of delegates had registered for the convention the week before, they didn't have an accurate count. And at that point, if we had stopped to just count everybody there, we'd be there till Monday. Nothing would get done. So it was another stall tactic. We also think he was setting up for a challenge to say, well, gosh, we never had an accurate delegate count, so they might have been cheating. When they kept asking for that, the crowd would get mad, and everybody would get mad. There were 15 people who would say, yes, we need that. And then the whole crowd would be like, move on,
Ginger,
we're fine. Nobody thinks there's something going on here that's cheating.
Right. Well, it sounds like the only hijacking going on were the attempts to hijack it by those supporting Romney. And as you said, they really felt that it was important to win the Maine event. And this is something, as you said, Nevada, much bigger state, yet they sent their $1,000 hour lawyer there. Fascinating what's happening there.
Well, there's another thing, too, that I think they're going to have a problem challenging the slate, and doing it with a straight face is because, of the people who are elected, one of them is the governor of Maine. One of them is Linda Bean, who's the heiress to LL Bean. These are not they're state legislatures. There are party committee members.
Wow.
So this is not like, crazy old bearded guy who wandered off the street corner wearing a sandwich sign. These are serious people who really have
Ginger,
a good history and are great people. So
absolutely amazing what's gone on there, and amazing the updates, the clarity with which you're able to relate this, because you were right there seeing it. We hope that we'll have you on, I'm sure we will, to talk more about this as it evolves. But I want to take a break here, ask you to stick around, because we now have to talk about the autism issue, and you're actively involved in that through the Canary Party Autism One coming up. And, of course, a real superhero in the Maine State Convention there. Appreciate you so much. Stand by. Lots more healing to go. We'll talk autism on the other side of this break with Ginger Taylor.
The Robert Scott Bell Show.